Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for your time and attention today. My name is Dennis Michaelis. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer for Accela. Accela, as many of you are aware, we focus on technology solutions for government that very much are focused on what we can do for helping build communities, grow businesses, and protect citizens. This is a part of a regular webinar series. We try to mix in both technical webinars wherein we can showcase our product, we can discuss architecture or capability sets. Other times we get into thought leadership. This edition, we're focusing on the customer story, first person. We're joined by several customers that are going to help bring to life their use case, specifically about how they're recognizing a portrayal similar to this graphic in front of you that has helped them advance the cause of their jurisdiction and is applied to maintain conformance with regulation and code, but also to provide great customer service. We pause here on this slide to give you a simple rendition of the way that we think our portfolio is arranged in such a manner so as to accommodate a true and broad portrayal of interoperation within government specifically. If you look at this slide from left to right, yes, it is a portrayal effectively of a city, but we serve state, county, as well as city of all sizes and all complexities. And what that requires is that we delve into and invest in our technology to provide capabilities truly from left to right as you see it here in the planning function, service request management to respond to issues out in the community. The building function, a very large revenue generating and pressure built in or pressure packed environment for many of us. Business licensing and alcoholic beverage control. The regulation of such is very complex and it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. Short-term rentals are an issue in all jurisdictions and in an ever increasing manner, so is cannabis regulation. Occupational licensing occurs at various levels of government on into safety such as fire prevention, etc. This is all juxtaposed by the user community. You have the agency users, the back office users, you have the resident and business users, and then ultimately you have persons in the field conducting affairs to, again, maintain protocol and conformance with compliance. This is all to say that it takes quite a lot to just move out of the silo of any one of these functions. And that's the unique advantage that an Accela brings. Part of what we attempt to showcase on a regular basis is the proof from customers wherein they may have started in a specific function like planning or like in building or what have you, but they have found a route to adopt an enterprise mentality. And that is a big part, again, as the distinction and differentiation that Accela brings is our ability to provide a portfolio that truly engenders the thought and the action of combining all capabilities necessary for the enterprise to function in a seamless manner. Joining me today, Nydia Logan Robinson, who's the Deputy Division Director of the Division of Planning and Development for Memphis and Shelby County, Tennessee. As well, I'm joined by Brian Zumwalt, who is the Chief Technology Officer of Pinellas County Government. So yes, we have two counties, but very interesting jurisdictional arrangements for each of you. Nydia, Brian, welcome.
Thank you for having us.
So the thought of enterprise, it's as we got to know one another in discussion and preparation for this talk today, I posed the question to you about the definition of enterprise, meaning ultimately it's technology that's focused on the broader organizational needs, the start and finish and outcomes, and the data necessary to create informed learning, if you will, and so as to make better decisions. That doesn't mean that we leave behind the users. That doesn't mean we leave behind the user experience, but we do dwell on the larger picture. Nydia, tell us a little bit about Shelby and the broader jurisdictional design and what you were confronting and effectively where it all started for you with Accela.
Absolutely. So again, with the Division of Planning and Development, we are located in Memphis, Tennessee, but our division serves the entire county. And for those of you who aren't sure where Memphis is, we're located along the Mississippi River in Western Tennessee, in the triangle of Arkansas, Tennessee, and Mississippi. We'd love to see you visit sometime. But our agency is a joint city-county agency. Even though we're a county entity, we serve several municipalities within the county, Memphis being the largest one, and we also serve 4 smaller municipalities. So as we considered our investment in the enterprise system in Acela, we knew that our implementation needed to accommodate that structure, our need to continue providing service for those additional municipalities. We also knew and were very intentional about thinking of all the ways that we could improve the development process from end to end for all of our customers. And for us, that meant an Acela implementation that not just included the Division of Planning and Development, which is responsible for traditional building permitting and land use zoning and planning, but it also included other major development functions like engineering. And thus, we launched our Acela iteration with traditional building permitting, land use, and development services, enforcement, licensing for a number of entity types, but also with city and county engineering. And that was a very important start for us. And since then, we have expanded to include the city fire department, also short-term rental registration, soon environmental health activities, and as recently as yesterday, additional conversations with Public Works about expansion on those, several of their permitting activities as well. So, for us, the building permit, we think of it, it's a very powerful thing. Often with the building permitting process, there are a number of other regulatory requirements that go with that building permit. So we think of that as our leverage to encourage others that have a responsibility in the regulatory process for development to join our various workflows and make the customer's experience as seamless as possible. So when we think about enterprise, for us, the enterprise impacts the entire development process from end to end and all of the entities that have some role in the process.
And it doesn't sound like it's been, I would say, a very straightforward process, because you have found ways to recruit capability, need, and definition into the process. So, and you've shared with us that there is effectively a consortium. You've got a troop, right? And there are representatives from throughout Shelby who come to the table, and you're reconciling the definition of enterprise for Shelby against what they're bringing forward as saying either a need or a timeline or a very urgent requirement.
Yeah, that's right, Dennis. We are part of our implementation was this concept of the governance committee. So this consortium, this gang of super users who have direct input on the roadmap of our implementation, how we're using the system, how their internal users are using the system, because certainly the Division of Planning and Development acts as the steward of the system, but we're not the sole owner at this point, right? There are so many other municipalities and agencies that have a stake in the system, like what we invest in terms of expansion, additional capabilities, features, staffing to support the system. So the idea of the governance committee is that it is a place where all of the users and decision makers can come together and collectively discuss challenges, where our next investments will be, and how we grow and change over time.
Sounds like a nonstop effort.
Absolutely. But I think that's why having some type of infrastructure like a governance committee and staff, of course, that is able to support the enterprise is incredibly important, right? It's one of the sustaining factors for our growth.
For sure.
Yeah.
Brian, how about yourself? For Pinellas County, did you ultimately initiate with an enterprise mentality, or did you find your way there?
No, not at all. In fact, we've had a very long-standing relationship with Acela, in that this started out really as a upgrade of our Permits Plus system for permitting function. And We had a very highly customized environment, one that did us well for about a dozen years or more. And we kind of went to a principle of we want a system that is out of the box. That's kind of made us go to the cloud with the whole SaaS mentality, using software as a service, but also kind of decustomizing and doing kind of best practice, for whether it's permitting or building review or whatever the business function is. But we started really as an upgrade of that system. And then, it kind of became after that, well, what else can we use it for? What else can we use it for? And we ended up finding use cases across the entire county. There's so many local government uses, especially citizen facing, uses that we found for it. And, I don't know if now is the right time, but I can share with you. I'm going to share my screen out just for a moment.
Please do.
Right now we're looking at, and can you guys see my screen okay?
Can do.
Yeah, so we start out with permitting, development review, building inspections, code enforcement, kind of the classic, things that we were doing even before in Permits Plus. But we moved on to consumer protection cases and enforcement for consumer protection. We've done a utility rebate program for doing capital improvements on the utility system, private utility permitting inspections, funeral home billing. These are things that people don't normally come and say, hey, I can use Accela for that. But these are actually workflows within the county that we found that Accela will actually do for us, and actually it fits nicely into our model. And then, as far as future use cases, we're working on our contractor construction licensing right now. We're looking at emergency management capabilities, doing what we call facility inspections for emergency management. Solid waste regulatory inspections, going out and doing inspections on small businesses that generate certain types of solid waste, and grease trap inspections of all things for utilities. So this is just an example of how I think Accela can be used across many different local government business lines, if that makes sense. And I think that we're doing a good job of looking at kind of enterprise usage for the platform.
It sounds like there's a very effective, both in the way that you're doing it, as well as what Nydia is describing, in terms of you've got representation from throughout the jurisdiction who can bring forward a need. I think creating that venue is part of it. Nydia, no doubt you've got a list that is comparable. Let's talk about how you rationalize what is the prioritization. We wish we could all have it done now, but what are the, call it the measuring sticks that Shelby uses to say, this is what will bring the greatest impact, and we're going to adopt this as a priority initiative?
I think the entities that determine those priorities themselves, right? We start conversations with any entity that has a permitting function simply by asking the question, what most frustrates you about how you're doing this right now? It's the most frustrating thing. If you could change anything, what would it be? And we get the typical list of that you might imagine, that I'm sure many of the folks on this webinar have experienced at some point, right? We shuffle a lot of paper. There are inefficiencies in how information is routed, loss of information, lack of transparency. And so really the other regulatory agencies and municipalities that are expressing interest are the ones that are dictating the priority for us. So I'd say that's one. And then the second, I think, factor would be regulation. So we prioritize short-term rental registration, for example, because there was an ordinance that drove the implementation of a registry for us in July 1 of this year. So that, I think, is the other precipitating factor.
So regulatory change is
Absolutely.
going. Makes sense. Brian, for yourself, let's use the measuring stick moniker to keep going. So you've got all these, call it capabilities that address the business needs. How do you measure success, especially in the Accela context? What Accela data is telling you we are or are not succeeding?
I think speed of services to the citizens is certainly one that I don't know that we have an actual KPI or anything like that we're using at this point, but Accela is a huge efficiency right now to delivering government services to the citizens. You know, you talk about shuffling paper around, you know, we want to get away completely from, you know, classic over the counter type, you know, transactions and move more to a paperless model for everything that we do. And I think Accela kind of helps us facilitate that. At the end of the day, cashless payments, making sure that we've got e-government services as much as we can that are citizen facing. I mean, these are all things that I think every local government aspires to, but you know, when we look at Accela, we don't look at enterprise is certainly the word that we're talking about in terms of this webinar, but we really look at it as kind of our e-government platform. Anything that we need to put out that's citizen facing, where we have some sort of financial transaction that's going on, we're trying to really kind of let Accela be that system of record for us.
I like that, cashless, paperless, and keeping that as a North Star in terms of how your prioritization occurs. Nadia, how about yourself? I mean, I think there's a big push for leveraging data and analytics in Shelby. What is the portrayal of the Accela data and why is it important to you?
So one way we measure success is certainly customer adoption. So every single month, we have a number of key performance indicators and service level agreements that our internal group is reviewing. So it's everything from time to issuance to the number of customers that are using the online portal to complete the various transactions across all of the regulatory activities. Today, and very consistently, we're at 90% plus adoption, meaning that 90% plus of our customers are using Accela to complete their, the range of regulatory transaction, permitting, certificate of occupancy, licensing, you name it. Their first choice is using the online system as opposed to coming into the office and completing a paper transaction. We, of course, still have customer service centers, and we still do some more consultation in office, but less simple permitting transactions in office. So I'd say customer adoption has been significant for us, and it's allowing us to use the time in office on more in consultation as opposed to accepting payments and moving paper from one place to another, or one reviewer to another. So we're able to use the full range of our skill in terms of staff and providing good consultation on design, what a building should look like, good code interpretation, as opposed to simply transacting things that we can do online. So that for us has been significant, moving from a 100% on paper, in-person operation to one that is now mostly taking those transactions online. And certainly kind of embedded in this whole integration has been efficiency. We have something of a complex operation in that the municipalities that we do permitting on behalf of still have some review and approval responsibility as a part of various permitting processes. So inherent in just using the tool, there are efficiencies that allow us to collaborate better and have greater transparency and more seamless review. And those are inherent, and it saves a significant amount of time, right?
Well, let's go back to the 90%. I mean, I think for Nadia, your plight to drive towards user adoption as being a key metric that suggests you're succeeding, that says there's touch. You've got citizens and businesses within the jurisdiction that are leveraging Accela, and you have found a way to define a process and provide information. Now this is part of the trick in enterprise, right? And if you agree with my definition, ours, that broadly enterprise is meant to serve the organizational outcomes, there's still the endpoint, the user. And how do you really evolve? How do you adapt and evolve to the user's requests and needs based upon their experience? 90% is an enviable number, so you're there, but how do you keep it there? Because they become a hungry crowd.
They are a hungry crowd. We are constantly surveying our customer base for input on their experience. We have a standard survey that we that's typically linked from the ACA. So there's an opportunity for ongoing feedback, but quite frequently, we ask about their challenges. We ask about the what they would like to see in the system, ways that we could support them better. We have a regular newsletter, a monthly newsletter that we send to our customer base. Often, if there's a survey linking a survey, we have an open one right now on use of the IVR, interactive voice recognition system, for inspection scheduling versus use of the ACA for inspection scheduling, just to give you an example. So the constant solicitation of feedback has been a very important tool for us to evolve the system. That's how we're engaging the customers. We listen to what they say, and to the greatest extent possible, we incorporate that into our into the system.
And what are you doing though to call it, you've got this array of feedback and you want to codify that in, will you say that broadly is what you will adopt as standards because you feel broader needs, or are you dealing more with like very unique circumstances, department by department, if you will?
So how do we integrate it? Things that are possible. I mean, there are some things, of course, that come out in the survey that may not be a desired thing to put on our roadmap, but those things that we're able to do and we think would be an enhancement, we put on a roadmap and on a timeline, and we begin to build those into the system. And the second part of the question, please say again. I'm sorry.
It was more, how do you discern whether or not you're going to say this is a broad, call it standard that we want to adopt about the user experience versus amending just a specific outcome because it's very unique departmental requirement, if you will. I think that's an ongoing wrestling match for how you apply the resource.
Absolutely. So the other I guess part of that, what goes on the roadmap is certainly resource, but effort as well. For the effort that we invest in this enhancement, this change, do we anticipate that it's going to be a significant benefit to the customer? Is it a have versus a must to have?
For sure. Brian, for yourself, I mean, I think you're both saying very parallel things. It is your platform. It has very much to do with how you are going to interact with the external user base, if you will. How are you ensuring that Excella is this indispensable experience for your customers?
Well, I think, we, believe it or not, we engage Excella, we engage, our partners that help us with our implementations. We try to be active in your guys' customer advisory groups, because at the end of the day, the more feedback we're giving you as to not only how we feel on the back office, but also how our citizens are interacting with the product, it's only going to help you with your future designs and releases and things of that nature. I feel blessed that we're in the cloud version of Excella, not to necessarily, I know that we have a mix of customers that are on, both on-prem and cloud, but, the speed at which we can receive updates to the system now without doing major upgrades and things like that we used to do in the past, that's helpful. It allows us to recognize, value in the system right away, as opposed to having to plan out, major releases of the software.
Velocity profile has changed.
It's tremendous. And it is a for some of our existing on-prem systems, it's a very big deal to do just a minor upgrade of the system, kind of all hands on deck. And so, to be able to go through the release notes in the SaaS model and say, hey, we see that this is going to impact this or that or whatever, there might be scripts that we need to take care of ahead of time. It does cut down tremendously on our time to, realize value, I guess is the right way to put it.
Makes complete sense. Brian, let's stick with you just for one moment here. I think there's a natural aspect to this, which is partnering. In 98, you and I have discussed this as well. You have needs. There's necessity in the partnership. There is then what can we do to promote the art of the possible together, et cetera. Brian, if we may, let's turn for a minute more towards the rigor side. I think it's a dream come true for a technology provider to be able to work with organizations like both of yours that codify what's important. You actually organize it and you spell it out, and we can reason through that information together. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your roadmap and how you actually justify that financially?
Yeah. So, in Pinellas County, we've kind of made two strategic decisions. The first one is that we are going to be a cloud first organization, meaning we want to keep our capital costs to deliver services down to a minimum. But the other thing that we've embarked upon, and this is really over the last 3, 4, 5 years, has been an application modernization effort. And so we publish something that we call our application roadmap, and I'll share this out very briefly for the group here. Every year we go and we actually upgrade, we kind of publish a document that spells out all of the major systems and applications that we use in the county, and, kind of give a profile of what the system does, what the cost of ownership is of the system. And Accela is a big part of this portfolio, obviously. But what we try to do is capture where we're going with every business system in the county, and kind of give it a 5-year roadmap, whether we're going to continue investment in it, whether we're going to upgrade it to something that's different. But as part of that process, we're really trying to go to the strategy of consolidating down. We used to have 170 different business applications in the county, to try to have a department support all of those things with all the different skill sets involved in everything. That's not feasible anymore. So why not consolidate down onto a handful of what we call enterprise platforms that can do multiple business functions for us, but we can support with a smaller team? To me, that's a sustainable model. It gets us to a point where we don't have to worry about every single type of technology skill set, to support our environment. And so that's our strategy, is to continue consolidating to a handful of platforms, use the existing staff and the expertise that they've developed, and really kind of maximize the business impact of those investments that we've made.
Like I say, selfishly, the advantage for something like that to reference, meaning the document that you shared. And I would imagine many of the persons on this call would be able to populate the document with very similar names, right? There's just categories where there's the known providers of technology. Then you end up with a portrayal of a portfolio. Knowing where we fit in the portfolio makes it so much easier, I think, ultimately for us to sympathize. Where are your priorities? Where are you feeling good and entrenched versus you've got to make some adjustments? We look for opportunity to be a part of that as well. Yeah. And it's not a rationalization per se, though you are in the midst of one. And I think many of the persons on this call may have responded to the webinar title because of that. Like, we're in the middle of a pretty large rationalization, call it design point, in many of the jurisdictions throughout the United States, despite what they are. Mm-hmm. Nadia, how about yourself in terms of the strategy, the layup of these are the priorities and this is how we're going to justify? How big of a political lift is that, or do you feel like that governance model is taking care of that for you?
I think the governance committee, that model, certainly helps, but the other thing that I think is really important is having the priority set by the highest elected official, that our significant investment in a system like Accela is one that we're going to double down on, and all of our regulatory and permitting functions should be preparing to make the best use of this system that we've made the investment in. That, I think, is the stamp of approval that a lot of cities and counties like us need, and really carries the rest of the roadmap. Leading from the middle is very difficult, right? So having your highest elected official, or the equivalent of that person, give the enterprise solution their stamp is significant in moving things forward.
Well, I think there's a lot of persons on this call that would sympathize with the leading from the middle concept, right? You are, in the end, you need sponsorship, and you need an ultimate decision maker, if you will. Absolutely. Making commitments, and that creates alignment. Yet technology such as what we're discussing survives administrations. The technology will continue on, and it needs the continuity. I think that's part of the trick here. I think there's a very important question that came in here, and it is about change management. And not just the change of administration or prioritization, but in the end, you have so much to juggle, Nadia, the governance model again, like how do you deal with the naysayers? Put it that, let's start there, right? You've had them and you have to prove it to them. How do you deal?
It's difficult, right? It's change is going to be a challenge, I think, in any process. The way we've dealt with it is by constant deep engagement with the users, the stakeholders of the system. We listen to their concerns and their ideas, their aspirations for the system, and we deliver on as many of those aspirations as possible. And when our users have seen the proof, I think that has been the motivation that they need to adopt and become, I think, advocates of the system. I think I shared in another conversation that we went live during the pandemic. We're a relatively new Acela user. So we received this kind of artificial boost in adoption because of that, because our users, internal and external, really had no choice but to adopt the online solution as our offices were closing, and we were desperately looking for new ways to continue doing business. So our story is a bit different in that way, because all of the change management rules went out of the window just as we were all feverishly looking for solutions to keep the operation moving. But certainly since then, that value of deep engagement of our internal and external customers has remained. And our best advocates are our internal users. And I will say, we also have an internal newsletter. It's called the Back Office. That is our, there you go. That is a communication tool that keeps our users up to date and current on how we are growing the system to adapt to their needs and their requests. I think that has certainly been helpful in closing the communication loop and keeping everyone informed, and also providing another way for users to communicate their experiences back to the administrative team.
So you're employing a lot of the, if not all of the best practices I can think of. Communication channels are open, you're publishing, you're soliciting, you're reacting, you're engaged.
That's the goal.
It makes a lot of sense. Brian, for you, change management, something comes along.
Well, it's critically important. I mean, when we did our initial implementation, obviously there was a lot of change internally on the back office that we had to manage with, our permitting folks, our plan review, all that kind of stuff. The hardest part of the change, in my opinion, and this was something that we had to really think about, was the external side. How are developers going to react to this, using this new system, this new technology? We feel very fortunate in Pinellas County that we weren't the first to market in our area to Acela. So we had other surrounding counties that had already adopted the platform, which actually made it very easier on the outside for that adoption, because a lot of developers that do business in Pasco County or Hillsborough County, which were already on Acela, they came to Pinellas and said, okay, Pinellas getting on Acela too. We know how to do that. So we kind of used the Microsoft model. We were kind of the last of the market, for our particular implementation, but it actually served us very well in that we already had a population that was kind of well acquainted with Acela, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. There's a very interesting question that came in. I'd like to turn our direction there, if we may, and that's really the concept of the emerging technology and what it represents in terms of. You can define it for us in your own terms, right? We could be busy enough with the extant technology to hand. Now, all of a sudden, AI is disruptive. It more so than I think any of us could have imagined.
Yeah.
And so then the question is, what are you doing about it? How are you weaving, be it AI or other emerging technologies that have presented themselves as potential for you? And how is that ultimately a part of your future plan, or how you could at least project right now, Brian?
So without naming any names of vendors, but I just sat in on a demo just this morning of an AI technology that basically can go and read a local building ordinance or building code and mark up a set of plan documents to a 95% accuracy rate. That's a game changer. That's a game changer in the industry that we're talking about. So, you know, AI right now, we're kind of in what I call a hype cycle. You know, everybody's looking at AI and it's kind of a buzzword, and that will calm down at some point. And at the end of that, I think real solutions are going to come out of it. But there are real local government solutions that are going to come out of that are going to literally change the way that we deliver services. And that example that I just talked about was one where we're looking at it going, my God, I mean, it's profound. So it's coming. And I think Accela, the fact that you're engaging with your customers to figure out exactly, you know, how those use cases could kind of roll into the technology development cycle for you, I think that's important, and it's going to end up serving you well. So
Is that a consistent sensation, Nydia, the wave, if you will, the surge that you're feeling? It's coming at you from everywhere.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of energy, I'm sure, like there is in every jurisdiction. Here, a lot of questions, and certainly we are very interested in the direction Accela is going to go in as it relates to AI. We're very eager to hear more about, you know, what that will look like in the platform and how we can leverage that. And I'm not an IT professional, so I hesitate to speak, but on this, but you know, I'd say from a department or a division level, we are in a wait and see, right? We want to take advantage of the great things about that new solution, but are certainly waiting for good options to present themselves for. Yeah.
Makes sense. It makes sense. I think, you know, part of what our chore Accela today is to be very focused on what you are saying and seeing. I mean, Brian, to your point, we are hearing and seeing stories like that every day, especially when what the emerging technology is doing is effectively attacking the low-hanging fruit of where things can really be put to work to pick up time.
Yeah.
Time is where it's at.
Time is everything. I mean, at the end of the day, the quicker we can get to permit, the quicker we can get to, you know, plan review there's real dollars tied up in those things. And I think technology has the capability of accelerating the time to market on some of these things. I think the sky's the limit, quite frankly.
Given what you know, you've been in this for some period of time, you've got vast experience, Brian, in the portrayal of enterprise platforms. You've got a grip on the stack of technology, if you will, of what Pinellas County relies on. Mm-hmm. Where will you be in 5 years, Pinellas County, that is?
Oh, if I had to paint a perfect picture, I'd like to be majority of our applications in the cloud. I'd like to be out of the box with minimal customization, which is a big deal for us in IT. You know, as soon as you start customizing a system, it kind of becomes problematic. You know, with two-factor authentication on everything, so everything's secure. You know, there's a lot of wish list items, and local governments, I think, you know, are moving in that direction, you know, for a lot of these things that I mentioned. But, you know, the hardest thing for local government right now is making the investments to modernize, you know, their systems. And it takes tremendous investment, tremendous effort, not just modernize for the sake of, you know, business process, but security. You know, you talk about cybersecurity right now and things like that. That's a big deal, you know, protecting your data. That's what we're focused on from the IT side, at least in Pinellas County. But I'd like to get to where 100% of our systems are modernized and all of our technical debt is left behind as a county. And we're getting pretty close to that.
I think a very, very aspirational, but a very realistic approach. I think that's these challenges are visible, but they're going to take some time and it's some evolution. Nydia, you know, not the technology angle per se, but you've got a career now where you've kind of come out of a department and you've risen up to a certain level where you have this perspective of where Memphis and Shelby can go 5 years from now. What do you see?
every regulatory entity in the county is using the same system to support the development process, and not just development, but any business or development function throughout our major city, Memphis, and the county, Shelby County. Also, with significant integration to other major systems. I mentioned, integrations with ERP systems that, just improve ease of use and communication across, the various financial systems that our cities and counties are using to take the additional burden of manual moving of financial information out of our major systems into ERP systems and the like. Same type of principle with integration with our complaint management system. So our aspiration is that we are truly an enterprise permitting and regulatory environment.
Wall to wall, 100%.
End to end, indeed.
Like hearing that. There's been a number of good questions here. I wanted to make sure I had the opportunity to address all of them. Gabe, if you happen to be there, are there any unaddressed questions that we should tackle while we have a moment?
We did have somebody ask if Brian would be willing to share his the information. I know, Brian, you'd said yes before. So yeah, that we will Alan will be reaching out to you on that.
Okay.
I think, Dennis, besides that, I think we're good.
Okay, wonderful. Well, I want to make, Brian, I suggested you might be a popular man if you shared that. I think it's a great artifact for anybody to bounce off of, and you're going to get a lot of, I think, good value out of it. So
okay.
With that, Nydia, Brian, I want to thank you both for giving us your time, as certainly the disclosure you made about the journey. I think there's plenty of inquiry, I think, in the Q&A here about, well, we've got to start our journey, or there may be others that are right along path with you and others that may be ahead of you. And I think there's learning, and that's part of what we're trying to foster here. Speaking of fostering, if we may, Gabe, if I may be able to share some information with everybody. And there were some questions about what are Excella's plans, certainly about not just the extant technology, what exists today and what we're doing to enhance our roadmap, but what are we doing to address the emergent? What are we doing to both not just be contemporary, but think around those corners for you? We have abundant opportunity to express all of that while we can certainly engage with you all on an independent and individual basis in between times. Our worldwide event, our anchor event of the year, Accelerate 2023, is just around the corner, coming up a little bit more than a month from now in September in National Harbor, Maryland. As always, we're devoting ourselves to the cause to ensure that this is a customer message led event. Its promotion and purpose ultimately is to connect customers. Yes, we want to share information about the technology and what we're doing to evolve it, but we do believe that the information sharing, just like what we experience today, is what it really is all about. And so we pack in a lot of sessions, a lot of education. There's an opportunity to meet everybody in the Excella ecosystem to ensure that you get the information and value out of such a trip. And we really do hope that we see you all there. Please keep your mind on the calendar for registration and timing. And we do have some promotions in place today to that effect. Again, I want to thank Nydia and Brian for any of you that got something out of this. Thank you for your time, and we look forward to the next edition. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Wonderful day.
Thank you.